Hi, everyone. My name is Cédric. I'm very happy to be here with you this morning. And I would like to start by asking you a question. If I pronounce the word freedom, I would like to tell you about freedom this morning. What comes to your mind? What is the first image which comes to your mind if I tell you about freedom? I'm curious about that. Maybe one of the first images which comes to your mind is the idea of flying, one of our oldest dreams, in a way, right? So, if we keep about this idea of freedom, I would like to take the example of an aircraft. I don't know if some of you know that, but an aircraft, a flying object, has 6 degrees of freedom. We said that it has 6 degrees of freedom. This is probably the highest level of freedom which an object can physically obtain around planet Earth, right? Physically obtain. 3 degrees of freedom refer to the plane's position around planet Earth, right? Very basic and simple things. Its latitude, its longitude, and its altitude, how high it flies. 3 other degrees of freedom refer to the plane attitude in space. For example, its bank angle, its heading, and the way it moves around this axis. So again, this is probably the highest level of freedom you can imagine physically around planet Earth. Now, to be able to enjoy this great freedom, the crew, the pilots, have to do 2 things. First, they have to deal with a known set of constraints defining what we call the flight envelope, right? This is a safety perimeter, and the plane has to stay into this flight envelope. I'm talking again about very simple things. For example, the technical performance of the plane. This is one of the constraints. Then the external constraints, the meteorology, the aerology, and other types of constraints like the human factors and the environmental conditions. And the work of the crew, of the pilots, is to maintain this balance, this right trade-off between all these constraints to enjoy the freedom of flying. Now, the second thing that the crew and the pilots have to do in order to enjoy this freedom of flying is that they have to constantly refer to universal values. You may also call them key landmarks, key points of reference, right? All along the flight, they have to refer to these points of reference. And again, I'm talking about very simple things, like the horizon. This is the point of reference to define the bank angle. The poles, geographic and magnetic poles of the Earth. This is useful to determine the position of the plane and the direction, right? Also the atmospheric pressure, which is a fantastic universal language to define the altitude of the plane. And using these simple and extremely powerful points of references, the pilots can control the flight, be sure that they go into the right direction, using these universal values. And the power of that is that it's true for any type of plane, small planes, big planes, with motors, without motors, civilian aircrafts, military aircrafts. This is universal, right? This is incredibly powerful to manage complexity, like you can imagine. Imagine all these 100,000 commercial flights flying every day. Imagine these 10,000 planes in the sky at the same time. This is possible and feasible because all the control towers, all the crews share a universal language, share dynamic flight parameters, and they're able to deal with this incredible complexity. Now, I would like you to think about economic entities. Imagine that these aircrafts I was talking about are economic entities. Think global, not only companies, not only businesses. Start global. A university is an economic entity. An SME, small and middle-sized enterprises, are also economic entities. An NGO, non-governmental organization, is an economic entity as well. Well, like aircrafts, all these economic entities have to deal with a certain set of constraints. Technical constraints, regulatory constraints, reporting constraints, depending very much on their size, their profile of activity, the place where they're operating, but still they have to deal with all these constraints. Now, there is a like and there is also a non-like. And now I'm talking about businesses. Unlike aircrafts, businesses are extremely diverse on planet Earth. There are countless. Do you have an idea of how many companies are operating on planet Earth? It's strange. Two years ago, one of the many agencies of the United Nations tried to estimate how many companies were operating in the world. They came up with one figure. I don't know if it's the right figure, but at least it just gives you an idea, the difference of scale with the example of the aircrafts. They came up with 100 million businesses in the world. And can you imagine that only 0.05% of these businesses are listed, meaning that they have to comply with certain sets of constraints, with certain reporting constraints? They're on the stock exchange. But this is only 0.05%, or maybe even less, because in these 100 million businesses, it goes from the shopkeeper in Tunisia to the hotel in Madagascar, and also to Coca-Cola. But this is huge. This is our daily activities, all of us, economic activity around planet Earth. All of these economic entities, unlike the aircrafts, they don't have one horizon. They have different horizons, different legacies, different histories, different objectives. This is extremely, extremely complex to deal with. Now, it's even worse, because unlike the aircraft, and now I'm talking about businesses from a certain size, they have to deal, when they work on their reporting, when they report about their performance, their orientation, their direction, they have to deal with two cockpits, not only one cockpit like the plane. They have to deal with a cockpit related to the financial reporting. This is the right part of it. And they also have to deal with a cockpit focused on the extra financial reporting. But I'm asking you, does this have any sense today? What is the point of having such a clear distinction and separation between financial reporting and extra financial reporting, with different dashboards, different indicators, different references, different terms, some would say short-term and long-term, different ways of talking about the activity of the company? And talking about reporting, sometimes you even wonder if this is reporting or juggling, because now if I focus on one type of reporting, which is corporate social responsibility, CSR reporting, well, again, you have so many initiatives, so many frameworks, Dow Jones Sustainability Index, Carbon Disclosure Projects, Global Reporting Initiatives, and so many others. And of course, there is a will to find some mainstream ideas, some key landmarks. But we are far from obtaining that so far, even if great progress is done. Now, do you think that, like for the aircrafts, don't you think it would be so great and so interesting to go beyond this situation and to think about a definition of a positive company in relation to the positive economy, trying to set up some very common and simple values, right? Let's take the example of the horizon. What would be the horizon for a positive company? Well, this is the interest of future generations. Whatever your size, whatever your type of activity, whatever your objective, whatever your place of operation, your location in the world, that would be fantastic if we could progressively install the idea that your main horizon should be the interest of future generations. This is one of the examples. Now, if you want to define one single cockpit, and this is pretty much what we are trying to do right now with many companies involved in this exercise, in France and elsewhere, trying to define some key parameters, some key control instruments which you would find in your cockpits. The first of these 6 control instruments, you remember the 6 degrees of freedom. We are looking at 6 control instruments. The first one is about the long-term vision. Does the company have a long-term vision? That may appear very simple, but if you take 10 CEOs, you put them in the same room, and you try to have them agree on the definition of long-term, you will have interesting surprises. I did that exercise, and it was very interesting. Depending on the history of the company, depending on their type of activity, some will say 5 years is very long-term for me, some will say 20 years is very, very far away from now. So it's very interesting to do this work. Second control instrument is about the ability of a company to produce wealth and to share it in an equitable way. Third control instrument is about the continuous improvement of the environmental impact, reduction of the environmental impact of the company, with different indicators behind this, of course. The fourth control instrument is about the development of skill and knowledge for now, but also for the future, for future generations. Number 5, the 5th control instrument, this is about being able to dialogue, to establish and maintain a dialogue with the ecosystem of the company, with the community, okay? And be able to create this idea of a shared responsibility, not only toward the environment, not only towards other aspects, but toward future generations. Let's talk together about our impact on future generations. And the last control instrument is about actually the ability to maintain well-being for the employees, a balance inside the company. Now, like for the aircrafts, if I take this image of the aircrafts, you don't only want to look at the current value of all these parameters which would be behind these control instruments. You want to see their dynamics, how they evolve in time. Because what you want to evaluate with the positivity of a company is whether or not it goes into the right direction. It's about progress. It's going to be a voluntary tool to monitor progress. Okay? So you want to see where it was 5 years ago and where it's going to be in 5 years from now. Does the company have objectives? Okay? Is it able to set objectives? Now, you remember this flight envelope I was mentioning before, no? With this idea of the plane, the aircraft staying in a safety perimeter. What we would like to do is define this positivity envelope for a company, or for any economic entity in the end, using these 6 control instruments and trying to see for company A or company B, how can you figure out this positivity envelope? Where am I located? Am I going into the right direction? What should be the main axis for my improvement? This is what we're currently trying to do with the movement for a positive economy. And indeed, thinking about the positivity of one company is not only about the entity in itself, as if it was isolated. It's about the place, like you saw in the control instruments, the place of the company or of the economic entity in its wider environment, right? Now, how can you contribute in your position today? I don't know. I mean, I see students, I see executives, I see public and private decision makers in the room. So what can be your contribution? What can you do about this effort of setting new standards? First thing, you can just start asking yourself about the impact of your daily activities, but also of your projects on the interest of future generations. Again, as a citizen, as a company owner, company manager, as a student, as a public decision maker, as a local elected people, this is a critical question to ask yourself. And the second question, if you had to define 3 or 4 or 5, maximum 5, key indicators to describe, which you would like to have for any company in order to be able, not as an investor, but just as a citizen, to know whether or not this company is working in the interest of future generations, what would be the key indicators which you would need for this company? And I would like to leave you with 2 things. First, an image of Solar Impulse. I'm sure all of you, I hope all of you are following this incredible world tour, only using solar energy. And I think this is actually the most exciting plane right now, and they are trying to define new standards, change our vision of what is feasible and what is not feasible. Precisely what we're trying to do with the movement for a positive economy at our small scale. And the second thing I would like to leave you with is a quote from a Canadian author called Marshall McLuhan, saying that on planet Earth there is not actually one cockpit, like I was saying before, right? All of you are the crews, and this is what I would like to leave you with. All of you, at your different levels, your different positions, can contribute to this new thinking about future generations and giving them more place in our daily activities. Thank you very much.